Welcome, everybody. I know everyone to the side of you is probably way more interesting to talk to than us, but we will totally demand your attention now. Don't feel like this is church. You may please come to the front, and I promise they won't lock the doors on you. Maybe. Well, okay, thank you. And if you're in the wrong room, like these gentlemen have found the exit, this is to talk about 3PLs. My name is Steve Clark. I'll be moderating, and then I'll let these three awesome people introduce themselves as well. Why don't you start with you, Fran?
Yeah, I'll start off. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm Fran Decastris. I work at ShipBob. I've been in the industry in logistics for 7 years with ShipBob, and I came from the retail and fashion industry in store, so very different. We're all spearheading something that no one knows how to do, so thank you for your bravery in this industry. We're all doing it together, but just here to give you insight because we started out with brands outsourcing with us, and now we also have an in-house solution, so here to give you guys tips and tricks about what to think about and what brands have thought about when they're evaluating both solutions with ShipBob. Here to be a fulfillment person for you. If you need any resources, happy to connect you with our ecosystem of partners, so just utilize me as a resource whenever you need. Nice to meet you all.
Mm-hmm. Hi guys, I'm Devin Killpack, and I have owned an e-commerce brand or a consumer goods brand for about 11 years called Gather, and then about 5.5 years ago also started a 3PL. So I see both sides actively today, and we have about 14 customers here in Utah in our 3PL. So be happy to talk. Whatever stage you're at, I've probably been there personally, from startup 11 years ago to today. We're shipping to Target and Sam's Club, and anyway, I'm excited to be here, be a resource for you, help out. Happy to offer any tips or advice, and want this to be very interactive. So please engage us.
Hi, thanks for being here. My name's James Wuthrich. I am currently with Nu Skin. I've been there for the last 7 years. Had a long career starting in the PepsiCo arena, CPG, supply chain, logistics, a lot of operational experiences as well as sales. So great to be here. I've got a lot of experience with 3PLs, insourcing, outsourcing, parcel delivery, kind of you name it. So I've got North American responsibility, international logistics, plus sourcing the U.S. and Canada with their parcel delivery, so a fulfillment operation is included in it, along with some development work that I'm doing for them. So glad to be here.
Yeah, we got a really good panel here. And like they said, I think we want to make this really interactive. So we'll probably keep our questions amongst ourselves pretty short. And then if you guys want to ask questions, we'd love to open it up. My quick background: I've been an independent contractor for operations and logistics for the past, say, 2 or 3 years. I own a software company that specializes in supply and demand planning called Plantster. So basically the main complaint I get from 3PLs is that their clients are always out of stock. So Plantster fixes that. Okay, anyway, let's start this. By raise of hands, we want to get a feel of who is in here so we can tailor our answers for that. How many of you are in the startup to, let's say, $1 million revenue range? Okay, so we got a couple in here in that range. What about, let's say, medium-sized business? Okay, so like 2 to, say, 20 million, yeah? And then we'll go anything bigger than that. Okay, great, so nobody bigger than that. That's good. And then how many service providers do we have in here? Okay. So we have a lot of 3PLs in here. We got a few brand owners. Okay, that helps us. Okay, well, let's talk to our small brand owners specifically. Okay, and let's talk through what decision making, or I guess as you're going through, if you're trying to help a new brand, what decisions do they need to, or I guess what points in their business do they need to consider when it's time to start looking into a 3PL? They've outgrown their garage. They're not printing out labels in their garage anymore. When and how do you guys go about that process?
Okay, I'll jump in because this is something I talk to brands about a lot because we want to be most cost effective for you, and also we're looking at our costs as well, but we're not going to put a brand in a warehouse if we don't think you guys are going to make a profit. So thinking about consistent volume wherever you're placing that inventory, so usually our number is like 400 shipments a month. Of course, we have brands doing less than that consecutively, but you want to have something consecutive to put inventory there, especially if you're higher SKU count. So, and again, I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you guys, but this is what ShipBob has thought of is like if you've got, say, 10 SKUs, you should be doing 40 shipments a month. So as you go up 100 SKUs, 400 shipments, so it's a 4-to-1 ratio. I'll try to keep it really simple, but as you keep having more SKUs, so if you're an apparel brand, you're kind of at it's harder for you. You need to build up more volume because every SKU is an individual spot in the fulfillment center for a reason, so we don't do mispicks, but you have to think about that, especially if you're gonna go into another location with a 3PL or go overseas, you definitely wanna build up volume to be consistently a couple hundred orders per month at minimum, and then if you've got a higher SKU count, think about that. So that's kind of what we think about ground line. And I'll let the other people jump in and I might have more to add, but just thinking about your SKU count and how much it's gonna cost you for storage, because I think that's the biggest feat for any brand coming out of a garage or a small space, and we work with a lot of brands like that, where people have built it up to like thousands of shipments a month on their own, and they're like, okay, I'm finally ready, but there's always maybe an earlier point where you can get to, okay, this is profitable, or this is not costing me so much to just have this storage, and having a fulfillment partner, I actually can put more into my marketing and actually push out more orders. So there's definitely a balance, but if you're consecutively even if you're doing 100 orders per month, like still talk to a 3PL. There's definitely different 3PLs that have different levels of volumes they're willing to take, and their storage might be cheaper than ours. So don't go hard and fast about my 400 number. That's just what we think about when we're thinking about what inventory you're putting in our facility.
One thing I would add is in that early stage, if you're thinking about where is my business going to be and you're just looking at 3PLs for the first time, I would encourage you to look as far down the road as you can, 2-3 years at least, and say, what do we think we're going to need in 2 or 3 years? Are we going the retail route where we're going to try and do wholesale, right, and sell to big box or even to like mom and pop kind of retail shops across the country? If not, is it just D2C? Is it on Shopify? You want to find a partner who kind of specializes in what you're looking for long term. So even if it's not an exact fit day one, but within a year you think it's going to be a fit on either like wholesale direction, you just want to make sure you talk about that early on. Else you'll find yourself kind of pivoting very frequently, moving in a year, or moving in 6 months, or moving too frequently, which adds a lot of cost for a startup. Moving 3PLs, there's a lot of cost involved and a lot of headache for you and for anyone who might be on your team helping with customer service. So those are just a couple of thoughts I have from my background as an early stage startup when we were looking at this, is really think through as much as you can into the next 2-3 years and think, what do you need? What are you going for?
Yeah, I think that's great feedback, just so having some runway in front of you so you understand what's going on. So it's probably the larger organization that we are, so the provider side, it's interesting. So we've been through an RFQ recently on the 3PL side, and we've actually looked for the smaller providers, frankly, to get that tender love and care as we were going through that process. The other thing I would say is for those who are providers out here, we've done some acquisitions, and we've actually looked, as frankly, Fran and I were talking, we've actually looked at ShipBob as that connective, rather than integrating them into our organization. We go through the same things that you're looking at, as to understand what those API connections, what the logistics and the difficulty and the hurdles that you have, the tech stack that's with the specific organization, because ours is, we're large, it's somewhat antiquated and hard to integrate with. So yeah, it's I agree with you, looking out and looking into the future and trying to have that plan together, knowing that you'll have to be nimble, because we've had to shift on a dime just going through a consolidation ourselves. So
yeah, what would you guys tell a brand when they're trying to make that decision between a very like buttoned up, sophisticated 3PL versus going with something a little bit more niche that is going to be giving you, maybe you're adding them into your own Slack channel, so you have like direct communication into them, versus one that's going to be a little bit further away but is going to be more efficient and probably a lot more cost effective too? How do you reconcile that? You either go super small and curated to big and saving on cash.
I think it's a great question. As we were talking in the lead up outside, one thing we talked through was how much customization a brand needs really determines and kind of drives where they'll be a best fit. If you are a brand that's going to be doing a ton of influencer packages and custom notes and custom packaging, and you really want to be kind of a boutique feel for your end consumer, then I think you're best with a boutique 3PL. Someone who can really take care of those needs, who's willing to go the extra mile. But if you are, if you're going to be selling to like retail stores and doing high volume orders, and you're maybe less custom, less personal touch, then I think you can fit really well with a big partner, and you'll get better cost there. You'll get maybe the attention is going to be similar across the two, but you'll get definitely better cost on both shipping and on the services that way. So that's an important factor to think through, is who you are, what is your brand identity, and what is that going to look like as you continue to evolve and grow, and think through, all right, we know we're going to be a little bit high maintenance on the care side and the custom touch side. We probably should take a look at boutique 3PLs, like smaller footprint, maybe not as many customers, and you never really want to go into a 3PL being either their smallest customer or maybe not even necessarily their biggest customer. Sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, because you'll get the right attention, and you'll have the personal touch you need.
What would you say, what are some like watch outs? So if you are going to go the boutique route, what are some things that you should expect to be a little bit more expensive? Because in my experience, when I've worked with clients and they're like, hey, we need to do an RFQ, our shipping rate or our 3PL expenses are way too high. And I go in there and I look at it, I'm like, okay, well, they're high because you're having this touch, this touch, this touch. What are some things that you should expect to be a little bit more expensive if you do go that route?
We were actually quoting a brand like that 3 weeks ago and talked to them, and their biggest concern is 3PL. Our 3PL is killing us. Our margins are so terrible because our 3PL. And we looked at their costs. We looked at their invoices from their 3PL, and they're actually very fair prices. Their market, both on shipping and on the services side. And so that is kind of a hard thing to go back and say to a brand. But hopefully you, if you're a startup in this stage, you can take that and recognize, okay, we need to be a bit introspective here and know who we are, that's one thing we're trying to tell this brand, like, hey, there might be a lot you're asking from this, and if you want cheaper prices, you're going to have to give up some concessions, less customization, or maybe reduce cost on your packaging. Maybe instead of branded packaging, maybe you need to dial that back. And so I guess it's a tough one.
It is.
But it is important for you to know who you're trying to be for your consumer, because that will drive a lot of your margin goals. So I don't know if you guys have something else to add there.
Everyone says 3PLs are too expensive. I feel like it's a common complaint. There's a lot to do with optimization. As you're scaling, obviously that's hard because maybe you're just doing small volumes. You can't have inventory in multiple locations. Even if you're doing big volume, if you've got that 1,000 SKUs to 7,000 plus SKUs, you don't want to be in multiple facilities across the country, which optimizes, but there's things you can do to optimize for cost. Even with the scalability of customization, there's a lot that we consult on, and this is what's scalable. Amazon doesn't do any custom packaging because you play by their rules, and it's very simple, it's very straightforward, it's low cost for them. If you want to do something customization and you're utilizing multiple facilities or they got multiple people working, you have to think about the processes and how many touches, and is this feasible for our team to do? A lot of people think assembly is kidding, and it's not. So with a mom and pop, they're definitely going to do things that we don't do, but we're always going to consult people on this is what works. This is what we call Amazon level logistics, and it works in 60 plus facilities worldwide. And so sometimes they have to level set with, like, is this a luxury brand, or could we make this more simplified? But I think that we could probably do similar things, but it just depends what you're looking to do and what your brand identity is, and like what you're not willing to compromise on. And a lot of times there are things you can compromise on for scalability or cost or having access to a new, like thinking in a couple years into the future. Like, none of you guys knew TikTok Shop was going to be a thing. We did not know either, and we were one of the first people to it. And sometimes it's just knowing that your fulfillment partner is on it we'll build an integration or work with the partner to build an integration or find a middleware so you are first to market as well and get the resources. And I think that's just building relationships with the 3PL you work with because they are a partner at the end of the day. So a lot of times it is too looking at, well, how do they think about the market? How do they think about the Shopify? And I just say Shopify ecosystem, we're agnostic, but everything's kind of built for Shopify now. And like if it's not, and you have a WMS that isn't integrated with these things, you're behind. So it's thinking about how do they think about all these different things in the space that I might need, and like what is their willingness to build or do this for me or have this to market, because we're also taking things in, like the tariffs as they come. Like we had to launch free trade zones in the last couple weeks. That's not something we thought we'd ever do. So a lot of times it's partnering with someone you know is advanced or is spending the money to invest to help you guys scale. But it really is subjective to what you want. Just, I think, use your intuition to know what your brand is. And if you're not willing to compromise on customization, then that's fine. That's a part of your brand, and people build amazing brands off of it. Just know that there's going to be scalability restrictions if you go with a mom and pop, but you might grow out of them and find a different way to scale and then use us eventually. So there's always a way to come back and work with other 3PLs in the future. So it's not just one and done, even though it is not cost effective to switch all the time, you can always switch.
Fran, you touched on a lot of stuff. I want to unpack.
Yeah, sorry, I brain dump a lot.
Let's unpack a little bit. Let's do the antithesis of the 3PL, and let's unpack that. You mentioned a lot of stuff that it was a good segue for what I wanted to chat about next was, and maybe James, you want to jump in on this this part, but you're going to have, and I'm going to talk mostly to we have a lot of service providers in here, so maybe we want to talk to them as if they've got a client that's coming to them and say, hey, we want to not use a 3PL anymore. We want to bring it all in-house now. We can give them answers, and you guys can think of like, okay, this is how I would advise my client to not do it or to do it based on, if you're, a fiduciary and you're going to help your client make the best decision. How do you make that decision to consolidate, come back, bring things back in-house? I know you have some solutions to that too. How do you go about making that decision? I know, Devin, you guys made that decision too to bring it back in-house as well. What all went into that? What were the factors? Yeah.
Well, for us, we just recently went through an RFQ determining and the final determination, obviously we look at cost, right? On cost per unit on a year-over-year basis, on a unitized basis is really critical to understanding what your operational costs and what they're going to be, because you're going to face GRIs, general rate increases from a 3PL, and it's expected, right? Costs go up for everybody every year. We looked at, really, it's through the lens of the customer was our first, how would we impact our customer with by using a specific 3PL, which we continue to evaluate that all the time. We determined that we had better control by consolidating from the East Coast into little old Provo, Utah, because we cracked the logistics code, something you can't lose sight of in your decision-making processes when you're going to, if you're going to outsource or insource. And our insourcing, we went through a lot of work to crack that East Coast code to get it out of Provo. So as you're evaluating your costs and with your 3PL and the service levels they're going to be able to, or the SLAs you'll develop with them, you really want to understand that next step, as you were talking, Devin, and that future is looking out, is what are you going to do for logistics as you grow and find on a cost per package basis what you're going to do to get your products to your particular customers. If you're local, but as you talk, Fran, and scaling, that's going to be a critical component as you go down and go forward. So we looked at both pieces, right? Customer first, our costs, and then what are we going to do from a logistics base?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll jump in with more info. So we recently, in the last couple of years, I guess it's not really recent, but pivoted to offering our WMS for brands in-house. We've had brands go from in-house fulfillment with us to outsourced and outsourced to insourced for different reasons. I think everyone had a great experience. What I saw was controlling the customization. That's one thing that came up a lot. Maybe there was like a certain pack out thing that no one could do or it's not cost effective. I've seen a lot of shampoos do like the custom label with your name. Like that's very customized, and like that's a label printer that not everyone has in a facility. But also with raw materials, especially with tariffs, I've been seeing a lot of people bring things in-house for manufacturing, especially if you're a CPG brand, not having manufacture over here, having to freight it over here, and there's probably more processes to it, as well as like the packaging, but just bringing stuff in-house to have more control and just make it cheaper, because when you outsource and you have to truck something somewhere else, we have our own trucks, so we try to make it as cost effective as possible, because we're doing deliveries all over the country, so we can move inventory, but that's not accessible to everyone. So just making it as easy as possible to get things done in your warehouse, because I work in returns a lot as well. The returns partners are my main partners I work with, and just figuring out how to complexly rework and reprocess a return to be reprocessed or resold. Not even if it's damaged, that's a whole different company, but even then too, it's like, well, how do you get it to someone if we can't do the reverse processing? And honestly, customer expectations of stuff is just really high. Talking to 3PLs that are focused on apparel and apparel brands, like maybe they didn't steam it that nice to rebag it, and customers are mad this $300 dress came wrinkly even though you have to steam your stuff. And just the expectations just wild, and that's like a very simple thing you think it would too. Just freighting it over to the partner, then they're touching it, then they're processing it, then what do? Ship it from there, collect enough inventory to send back. If you're in apparel, like that's already too late, you're probably on a new SKU now. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration of like the process and making sure like you can get the most out of the landed cost of your product. So those are the things that I think we've seen recently as brands just bringing things more in-house to have more control and just have everything in one location versus having to like freight everything. And honestly, it's more environmentally friendly that way as well. So we should probably all think about how we can be a little bit more local. I think this group does it the best. You guys are all very Salt Lake City based, like keep that because it's more cost effective and it's just better for our future. But those are the things I've seen as of recent.
Just quick to add here, I think you touched on a really great point about cost and cost effectiveness of bringing it back in-house. And that was the primary driver for Gather when we decided to do fulfillment again ourselves about 5.5 years into our business. And it was because we were growing more complex. Our product offering was growing larger, and it was around this time, COVID, where import costs were ridiculously expensive, like 3x, like 300% increase, you know. And so we started bringing items in flat and then filling them in our warehouse. So it was a good transition time because we were growing more complex and we were needing better cost structures. So that was a key driver for us. Typically, those are our key factors for a brand who's going to bring it back in-house after being with a 3PL, is realizing we can probably get lower cost and we are a little bit complex, so let's do it in-house. It's definitely not easy. Bringing it back in-house, you're trying to be both an expert at growing your consumer goods brand or your product company, but also running a 3PL and running any sort of fulfillment center. There is a lot of sophistication that actually goes into it. It's simple in nature, but there is a lot. So expect that if you are going to bring it back in-house, there is also a lot of attention you'll divert from your main focus and your main gig to keeping the fulfillment center up and running.
Yeah, unless you want to become a full-time warehouse manager, you will have to hire somebody to manage that. The labor, the time clocks, all the
peak
stuff.
Seasons, ramping up,
season.
double or tripling your team size
So
to get
much.
orders out. Yeah.
Honestly, props to anyone who's built a warehouse without any knowledge. I think we're all doing that in this industry, but we've seen it time and time again where people are like, I don't know what I don't know, and they just piece things together. Because the things also to think about too is we're talking about why you should move it in-house, but also things you have to think about is, do you have the best carrier rates, as well as do you have access to building integration? So this is also stuff you have to think about as well of like, okay, now we want to have a NetSuite integration. Does our WMS have that? Or if you built something in-house, like, are you going to build it? So those are also things to think about. It is very sophisticated and you have to keep thinking forward, but it's hard to know if you've never been in the industry before. So that's why we try to help brands in-house just know what they don't know by experience and just set up processes and like be a resource for them, because there's a lot that goes into even just running the warehouse. I think the integration thing is like the biggest thing you need to know is like, if you're going to be in-house, like what are you not going to have access to by having a 3PL that has trucks and partners and integrations and funding for the integrations and multiple locations. So there's a lot to take into it, but just as they would say, like make a 1, 3, 5, 10-year plan, like they say, for your life. Like that's definitely something you should do for business. And honestly, the biggest apparel brands are doing that. They're utilizing a 3PL right now or multiple, and they have a 3, 4, 5-year plan of who they're going to use, and they already have those RFPs in process. And so just thinking about it more sophisticatedly, or like a business owner. I don't want to call us consumer brain people, but like sometimes you are using our consumer brains and we have to plan a little bit more forward ahead. But those are just other things to think about, that besides what you want to do and the brand you want to present, you have to think about all these other things that come with running a warehouse and new things that you'll want to add on, that if you're running your own warehouse, you're in charge of implementing and funding, which I think is the biggest thing. It's like funding integrations and getting them built. So
That's true, very true. I have one last question to finish it off with everybody, but I want to take questions.
Hey, yeah, I didn't know if this was a Q&A.
It is totally a Q&A.
Giselle.
I think
Yeah,
you said that at the beginning, but
yeah.
you could have cut us off.
so I help run that fulfillment center.
Mhm.
And this is maybe towards you, Devin. So when we have customers that say they want to do it in-house, they've grown to that point, we're kind of graduating them out, that's great. How would you say, because you now also have 14 other brands that you fulfill for, at what point did that become a cost positive move? Like, was it just for your own brand, and were you bleeding at that point, so then you added on a second one, a third one, and a fourth one, and now you're like, oh, now it makes sense? Or was it a cost benefit move from day one? It was a cost benefit move from day one, but we were careful about evaluating that beforehand.
Yeah.
The biggest part of that came down to shipping rates. And as we evaluated, we had enough volume at the time when we moved back in-house that we were able to go direct with carriers and get pricing that was actually even about 15% better than we were getting with our 3PL. And maybe it's because they were marking up the rates quite high. I'm sure their rates were actually much better than ours. But yeah, short answer.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have any additional insights, or would you change any of your answers if we're talking about perishable goods?
Perishable is like a whole nother beast. I know. The stuff that is like the hardest thing, I feel like no one's actually focusing on. Perishable cold chain fulfillment is just difficult in itself and costly. And what I've heard from our cold chain partners is that it makes sense when you're doing consecutive volume, like I was talking about. If you're just starting off, like, it really is better just to self-fulfill yourself. But you have to take into account things that spoil, or didn't someone just talk about like, okay, we ship it during the winter, but yeah, that was you during the summer. It's not great.
Bad. So I currently work, I work at a company here in Salt Lake called Spoonful of Comfort. They do frozen soup. And so they freeze the soup for three weeks. And then they also cold package it and then ship it. We've got 2 locations, one in Salt Lake, one in Pennsylvania, so we get East End and West Coast. So we do reach about 90% of the US within 2 days, within 2-day shipping. But we've had to implement, like, FedEx had to be our carrier that we ship exclusively FedEx on Fridays, because FedEx has a Sunday delivery option and UPS does not. And so there's just some things that you have to do. I do agree that in-house fulfillment for frozen is the way to go. I spent some time consulting for another frozen brand here in Utah that we tried to find a 3PL that was really, really good at shipping direct-to-consumer frozen goods, and cost was never there. But we could do it on our own. We just couldn't do it through a 3PL because it's so hands-on. It's so hands-on. So yes, it changed lots of my answers for perishable.
Yeah, you can have more control, and honestly, the cold pack process I think is the most important, and not a lot of people do it. Like, we're not going to add cold pack to. We'll have temperature control, but cold pack adds an extra packing process. But I think that's the most important thing. I'd be interested to see if these meal delivery, because what you're doing is you're bringing brands into your warehouse. I'd be so interested to see if somebody's doing it already in a big infrastructure that you could just join, and they already have this infrastructure for cold chain. But it probably is best to do it in-house, which sucks. But I think that you have more control over the freshness as well. And I've seen a lot of people sell out of ghost kitchens and kind of have their own process set up, just because they have more control over when products go out. We use shelf-stable stuff that's 3 months, but that's easier to ship out.
Yeah, the hard part in that one is your freezer space is your constraint, right? To have a 3PL actually do really good fulfillment and hold a lot of product for you, it's very costly for them to hold that much. So there's a lot of things against that. Are you a provider or are you a brand? Brand? Oh. You do it in-house right now? Are you evaluating going to, have you been looking for 3PLs to do it?
Not really, but I was just wondering if there was something I was missing. Consider it.
So this is validating for you. So you're like, yeah, I'm doing the best. Got it. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm curious if when you guys are consulting a brand looking to enter 3PL, is there like a sweet spot in their margin they should be giving up, or when you talk about cost, like when does it make sense typically?
To go,
As a margin?
so to go from self-fulfillment to a 3PL? Okay. I mean, I can answer like from a percentage of revenue. That's usually what I use. If you guys want to go off, go ahead. I know.
Dive in first.
Okay, so my metric was always like 11%, right? Total all-in transportation. That's kind of like 11% of revenue. So if I'm doing if I'm doing $10 million in revenue, I should expect that my transportation cost would be 11% of that. So don't make me do math on the spot. It's 11% of 10 million.
And yeah, I would say depends too on the size of the product. So some companies are going to be like apparel. It's going to be light and small, and it's I think it can fall in range with that 11% pretty easily. Yeah. And hopefully they don't have like 3,000 SKUs and 1,000 orders a month. You know, that's like tons of inventory for a very small volume. But if they're larger items or specialty items like hazmat or something like that, then that's definitely going to creep up from 11% up to, I've seen as high as like 17, 18% of the total. But then, of course, you have to make concessions for that other places on the P&L.
You can find 3PLs that specialize in those things too. Like we have a 3PL partner that does over 50 pounds over the size limit we have, and so they're really cost effective, and we've gotten better pricing for heavier weight. Toilet paper I know isn't the heaviest weight, but it's still heavier, and like they're still winning probably against us. So there's definitely people that specialize in different products, especially apparel too. Like we're going more focused into having those complex returns processing, so I think look at your product as well, and if you find brands that work with a 3PL that's more bespoke to that, then connect up with them and see what they're doing, because they can maybe make their processes or their pricing a little more cost effective, knowing the constraints and the pain points you guys are experiencing in that specific vertical, especially for stuff that's heavier weight. Like that is just another game. But again, everyone's ordering Peloton bikes and skateboards and surfboards. Like we're not going to get away from it. It's just finding who's the most cost effective. But even then too, again, it's about distributing inventory, optimizing. So from there, you can optimize costs by splitting inventory. I kind of already went over that, but there's a lot of things you can do. But if you're starting off small, just find someone who really fits your type of brand and really services your brand well, and that's probably a good place to start. And then there's hundreds of 3PLs to choose from there. So like, don't get into like page 10 of Google. Like, just utilize people that you know and like people that specialize in stuff. That's what I would say.
And as expected in this session, we went over time. Yeah, who would have had that on their bingo card? Okay, this is it. Thank you guys so much for your time. Your expertise, great. Thank you. If you guys need more questions, feel free to come up and talk to us.